Tonight, the search continues for a couple who went through the ice at Sagkeeng First Nation.
First thing is the amount of investment in First Nations issues, $17 billion over 7 fiscal years.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Perry Bellegarde gives his take on the best of 2018 and what's on the horizon for the new year.
It's a beautiful fan and a lot of work went into that.
And we're still looking for the owner of an eagle fan dropped off by a man he said found it in a dumpster.
Good evening. Welcome to the first APTN National Newscast of 2019. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen. We begin at Sagkeeng First Nation, where volunteer searchers have located the remains of one of 2 snowmobilers who went missing there in November. Ashley Branson is on the scene.
A volunteer dive crew is here in Sagkeeng First Nation. Chief of the First Nation, Derek Henderson, says the Hatarian Emergency Aquatic Response Team, also known as HART, has discovered a male body. The body is suspected to be one of the 2 snowmobilers that disappeared in November while trying to cross the river. Chief and family have declined to comment at this time due to high emotions. Ashley Branson, APTN National News on Sagkeeng First Nation.
A well-known advocate for Indigenous women and youth is missing from Hazelton, British Columbia, and her family and friends are desperate for help to locate her. Cindy Martin was last seen on December 23rd at 9 p.m. leaving her mother's house. Her vehicle was later found near the Hegel Gate Bridge. Her wallet, money, and cell phone were inside the vehicle. Extensive air and ground searches by the RCMP have come up with no leads. Family members say Cindy needs medication. She is described as 5'3", 170 pounds, with medium-length hair, and it's dark brown. She was wearing a gray jacket and dark pants. Please call your local RCMP if you have any information.
She's never disappeared like this before, to this extent, and she was looking forward to the Christmas holidays, and we are just hopeful that she is somewhere warm and safe, and she will contact one of the family members.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. One of Canada's largest oil producers is preparing to learn its fate on charges related to the deaths of blue herons at one of its Alberta mine sites back in 2015. 31 birds were found dead at Syncrude Canada's oil sands mine north of Fort McMurray, and the company could face a fine of up to $500,000. It's alleged that they dumped harmful substances into the waters where the birds lived. Syncrude was fined $3 million for the deaths of over 16,000 ducks when they landed in its tailings pond in 2008. Whether you celebrate the holiday season or not, gift giving is an important part of Indigenous cultures. But what happens when a gift loses its way? Here's Brittany Hobson with an incredible story out of Winnipeg.
Decked out in an oversized winter jacket and black sunglasses, this pseudo-Santa is not the jolly guy children write letters to every year. But he does come bearing gifts, even if they are carried in a garbage bag instead of a velvet sack. Earlier this week, this anonymous man dropped off a mysterious present at APTN headquarters in Winnipeg. Inside the navy velvet case, an incredible surprise. A handmade eagle feather fan, completely intact. Included is a handwritten note saying the fan was found in a dumpster about 6 years ago. Apparently, it's been sitting in a garage since then. The author asks APTN to help find its rightful owner. The front of the eagle fan features some specific beadwork. We aren't showing this in hopes of returning the fan to the original owner, who would be able to describe the design.
Somebody went into a lot of trouble to glue these eagle feathers in the appropriate places that they're in.
Charlotte Nolan, a Two-Spirit sun dancer, believes the fan belongs to a jingle dress dancer. She says someone would have spent hours creating this piece.
It's a beautiful fan, and a lot of work went into that. Delicate work, the bead work, you know, somebody took the time to bead that for somebody and put it together for somebody.
Nolan says carrying eagle feathers gives First Nations people a way to connect to something bigger.
It's because grandmother and grandfather eagle, for us, they're the ones that fly the highest. They're the ones that are closest to the Creator.
Each fan made is designed specifically for the dancer. To lose or have one stolen would be like losing a part of yourself, says Nolan.
Hopefully it'll get back out to the powwows and, you know, be able to dance once more.
To claim the fan, or if you may know who it belongs to, you can contact me by email at bhobson, that's BHOBSON, at aptn.ca, or contact our APTN National News Facebook page. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We need to take a short break, but when we come back, a year-end review with National Chief Perry Bellegarde and what's on his radar for 2019. Stay with us.
On the East Coast, we have -9 and sunny in St. John's, -6 and snow in Halifax. -25 and sunny in Nukshuak. Kuujjuaq's -25 and sunny as well. -12 in Saguenay and Chibougamau and snow. -6 in Montreal. -3 in North Bay. -1 and snow in Sault Ste. Marie. -1 in Sioux Lookout and Thunder Bay with snow in those places. -10 and snow in Churchill. -5s for God's Lake and Norway House. 2 and snow in Gimli and Winnipeg. 0 in Princess Harbour. Only sunny place is Swift Current and 6 degrees. -2 in Saskatoon. -6 in Stony Rapids and sunshine. -3 in Buffalo Narrows and sunny. -2 in La Ronge and sunshine.
Welcome back. Like most years, 2018 had its successes and its failures. Perry Bellegarde won his second term as National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, and he joined Dennis Ward earlier to chat about what he sees as the victories last year and what his priorities are for 2019.
National Chief, thanks so much for taking some time for us. What good came out of 2018 for First Nations people?
Well, good question. When you think back to 2018 and what happened for First Nations people in a positive way, I think back to a number of things. First thing is the amount of investment in First Nations issues. $17 billion over 7 fiscal years, you know, for education and housing and infrastructure and water. That's an unprecedented amount. So we've got to make sure that those resources get out to the communities and that they have a real meaningful impact on the ground. So that's one of the big things. I also think about NAFTA, pushing for an Indigenous Peoples chapter throughout NAFTA. And now there is a Canada-USA-Mexico agreement, and it, by far, when you look at it, it's the most progressive as it relates to Indigenous peoples and Indigenous peoples' rights. That's another big thing. Another big thing is getting government convinced that they've got to co-develop legislation with us as First Nations peoples. So we're beginning the process on Indigenous Languages Act. We're beginning the process on the child welfare piece of legislation. So those are positive developments. But we've got to keep building and doing more because there's still a huge socioeconomic gap that exists. And we have to close that, because once that gap closes, it's not only good for First Nations people, it's good for Canada as a whole. So we have lots of work to do.
National Chief, would you say there were some step backs from reconciliation in 2018?
Well, when you think of it across Canada, there's a few setbacks we wish we could have moved on a lot quicker. You know, when I think about the justice system and starting to move towards restorative justice versus punitive justice, I think about the issues with policing in Quebec, the Sûreté de Québec. I think about the issue of policing in Thunder Bay. You know, I think about all those things, and I think we have to really collaboratively and collectively work together to start working towards a First Nations justice system. And we need more First Nations police officers, First Nations court workers, First Nations juries and judges, and all the above. It's about a whole justice system that needs to be revamped. And that's what we got to put our energies going forward. And I think we can do that.
You've spoken about having 3 priorities ahead of the October 2019 federal election. What work do you need to get done?
Oh, there's a lot of work. We got to make sure that all of our priorities get into every party, major party platform, from the Liberals to the Conservatives to the NDP to the Greens. We have to advocate so that we see ourselves and our priorities and our issues reflected in their party platforms. As First Nations people, we've said we need a new fiscal relationship with the Crown. One that's based on total membership, on and off our communities, one that keeps up with inflation, one that's treaty-based, and even a percentage of GDP from the land and resource wealth, which we're sharing. That's a new fiscal relationship with the Crown we need. We need to work towards treaty implementation. We have a treaty with the Crown, and treaty will always trump policy. And so no matter who gets in, our relationships with the Crown and the honor of the Crown must be respected. We've got to fix 4 outdated policies: comprehensive claims, specific claims, additions to reserve, the inherent right to self-government are all currently based on termination of rights and title, not recognition of rights and title. So we've got to work on those pieces. So there's a lot of work going forward. And I think we can get this done. And if we get this done in a good way, you're going to have a better country for everybody.
Well, it should be an interesting year. National Chief, appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Policing problems, historical and cultural debates, and grassroots movements working to improve the lives of Indigenous people. These are just some of the stories we covered in the province of Quebec in 2018. Here's a look back with Tom Fenario.
2018 started with a collapse in relations between Indigenous frontline workers and Montreal police. During a Quebec inquiry into Indigenous relations hearing, police were called out for not taking sensitivity training seriously. Naguset, director of the Montreal Native Women's Shelter, described their attitude as this.
I don't really want to know about your history. I just want to know, what do I do when I see a drunk Indian?
Police participants in a training session appeared to take issue with certain cultural elements, such as the blanket exercise. They later said that Cree Métis woman Vicky Boldeau lacks the qualifications to train them, even though Vicky Boldeau testified that she has given over 40 training sessions.
Every time we keep sitting down at a table, if we get invited, every time we sit down at a table, it's like we're being told what to do and how to do it, rather than with all the valuable information that we're bringing forward.
The training of Montreal police became a hot topic again in the summer when a 48-year-old Inuk woman went missing after being held in police custody. Mina Kuliak, who is from a small Inuit community and only speaks in Nuktitut, was released from a detention center in an unfamiliar industrial part of the city at midnight. Suffering from mental health issues and with her arm in a sling, she went missing for 5 days before she was found safe by police.
When you talk about Indigenous people falling through the cracks, this is a perfect example.
In October, Montreal police invited APTN to attend their new training session. 3 Indigenous people spoke for 4 hours to police about difficulties vulnerable Indigenous peoples face on Montreal's streets. But there is no cultural element to the training.
The reason why there was a change in the training, we had a research department do a sondage, a survey, and it didn't respond to the operational needs of the Montreal Police Force.
Another Montreal controversy came about in May. In a letter to the Le Devoir paper, Professor Luc Normand-Tellier says the practice of acknowledging Montreal as Mohawk territory is fake history. His letter points to hypotheses. That when Jacques Cartier first traveled to what is now Montreal, he met a large settlement of First Nations known as the St. Lawrence Iroquois. And that due to linguistic and archaeological evidence, the St. Lawrence Iroquois are a distinct people from the Mohawk. Mohawks from Kahnawake, located just south of Montreal, vehemently disagree.
He doesn't understand oral tradition. He doesn't understand the scientific things we are finding. He's not understanding what is being found and how those findings show the presence of Iroquoian people in this whole area.
But any hard feelings this debate may have stirred up were possibly softened by the unrelated but long-fought-for return of 500 acres of land to Kahnawake in July.
It was a good day when we were notified that the actual transfer was done and that the land base of Kahnawake after centuries has finally grown and not decreased.
Other positive developments in 2018 saw Montreal's creation of its own grassroots Indigenous street patrol called the Wolf Pack.
What we have going on with Tina Fontaine and missing and murdered women, you know, enough is enough, and it's time for our group and our men to and our people to stand up.
In January, another grassroots organization, the Inukjuak-based Unak Men's Association, received a $500,000 Arctic prize to continue teaching traditional skills to Inuit youth. The idea is to keep youth out of trouble by affirming their cultural heritage.
There's a gap between the generations, that we have realized, that there's a knowledge gap traditional knowledge. You know, that's partly from, you know, the school system that's, you know, taking a lot of their time, you know, teaching a different culture, teaching a different subject.
And finally, after a year and a half of uncertainty, the Open Door Shelter recently moved into a new location. The shelter serves many of Montreal's vulnerable Inuit population. That they will continue to do so is welcome to many here. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Still in Quebec, the public inquiry on relations between Indigenous people and certain public services held 27 weeks of hearings across the province last year. Here's Danielle Rochette with a few more highlights from La Belle Province in 2018.
The Quebec Public Inquiry was created in 2016 following allegations of sexual assault and physical violence against police officers by Aboriginal women in Val-d'Or. There were no criminal charges against the 15 Sûreté du Québec officers facing allegation. The Quebec Inquiry has been looking into the way Indigenous peoples in Quebec are treated by the police, the Province Youth Protection Agency, the Public Health Department, as well as the justice and correctional systems. Suzanne Arpin, Chief Counsel for the Quebec Inquiry, says many voices have been heard in the last 2 years.
Depuis le début de la commission, nous avons ouvert 1047 dossiers. Alors, ce sont des gens qui ont voulu être entendus, soit des citoyens, des groupes, des regroupements.
During those hearings, some teams emerge.
C'est pour ça que le commissaire a déjà annoncé 2 grands appels à l'action qui vont toucher la formation et l'éducation. Alors, quand on parle de formation, on parle des personnes qui travaillent auprès des communautés autochtones et quand on parle d'éducation, c'est vraiment l'éveil de nos enfants, de nos petits-enfants, dès qu'ils sortent du cocon familial, d'être en contact avec des réalités autochtones.
On February 2018, the City of Montreal took one more step towards reconciliation with the 35,000 Aboriginal people living in the city. Mayor Valérie Plante presented the city's new Commissioner for Indigenous People, the first of its kind in Canada. A key part of West Wainipi Cree lawyer Marie-Ève Bordelot's 3-year mandate is to solidify the relationship between Montreal, the different nations, and the urban Indigenous community. Almost 1 year after her appointment, Bordelot says a strategy is already in the works.
We've conducted a consultation in order to really understand what is the vision and the expectations of the communities in terms of reconciliation. We've also worked with the local police force, DSPVM, and the Indigenous urban community in order to improve their relationship between everybody. Right now, we've just finished a consultation, and we are drafting the reconciliation strategy that we are hoping to be adopted in the new year. At the same time, we are implementing few measures, such as developing archaeological guidelines and the restitutions of archaeological human graves to the communities.
After 20 years of negotiating, the Atikamek Nation officially took control over youth and children's services. Grand Chief Constant Awashish spoke about the historic moment during a press conference in November.
Our youth, for us, that's our future. So we want to make sure that the way we approach with them, the approach that we take with them is reflect our culture. We use our language, which is very, very important for us, the Atikamek Nation, and preserve our identity.
And the legendary Abenaki filmmaker Alanis Obamsawin was immortalized on the facade of a building in the heart of Montreal last month. Depicted as a woman of conviction, courage, involvement and resistance, Obamsawin inspired young Atikamek artists making Ottawa.
On a besoin de plus de représentation autochtone et d'auto-représentation aussi. Et c'est important pour nous de s'auto-représenter aussi et laisser la marque aussi pour les prochaines générations qui vont venir après nous.
The mural is the 20th in a series paying tribute to great Montrealers. Danielle Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
It's time for another break, but there's still more news to come, so stay with us. And first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather.
2 Northern Alberta, -6 in Fort Chip and sunshine, -2 in Fort McMurray and sunshine, 1 in sunny in Edmonton, 7 in sunny in Calgary and Lethbridge, 9 in rain in Campbell River and Vancouver, 10s for Tofino and rain in Victoria, -8 in Dease Lake, sunny, and -5 in Fort Nelson, -10 in Old Crow, -12 in Rock River, -8 in Wrigley, -9 in Fort Simpson and snow. Tuck is in at -18 in clear, Sax Harbor -23 in clear skies, -23 in Cambridge Bay, -23 in Baker Lake, but snow there, Chesterfield -22. The Blue Licks -30 and clear, -26 in Cape Dorset, -27 in Iqaluit.
Welcome back. An Inuk woman known for being a first has yet another first to add to her collection. Eva Re-Ack will become the first former Nunavut Premier to receive the Order of Canada. Re-Ack was Nunavut's first language commissioner, and she became Nunavut's first woman premier in 2008. It was a post that she held until 2013. According to the Governor General's office, she's receiving recognition for her lifelong dedication to promoting Inuit culture and languages as a public servant and a politician. Re-Ack will receive her award sometime in 2019 at Rideau Hall alongside 85 other new members. Have you ever wondered what it takes to be an investigative journalist? Well, earlier today on In Focus, we talked to the APTN Investigates team. We discussed some of their best moments over the last 10 years of that show and the work that goes into putting out an investigative story.
I started to see that, you know, one of the biggest crimes in this country, crimes are perpetrated on Indigenous people, and that there's a really high level of accountability possible.
Right.
So I started to see that Indigenous investigative journalism was really, you guys were the only ones doing it.
About, you know, going down rabbit holes, and that for me was a bit of a challenge in terms of knowing how long to go down a certain rabbit hole before deciding it wasn't going to pay off. I mean, especially when you're looking into a story that happened 40 plus years ago, which was what I was doing. I mean, you can spend a lot of time just calling every person with a certain last name in a phone book in a certain area, that kind of thing, or trying to figure out if the person in this newspaper article is the same person over here that did this thing, and you know, that sort of thing.
That is all the time we have tonight. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. If you missed that In Focus featuring the team from APTN Investigates, it reruns tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a great night.